So welcome everyone. Thank you. It's a bit loud. Good here? Okay. Hi, welcome to the Houston Maritime Museum. My name is Lucia Cerritos and I'm standing in for Leslie Boland, our executive director, who's actually, the only reason she's away is because she's attending the Council of American Maritime Museums meeting in Los Angeles. So she's going to bring back a lot of information for us. So that's why she's not here. For those of you that are new here, welcome. We are very glad to have you all here with us tonight to hear Mark's lecture. Just a bit of housekeeping. On your chairs, you do have a lecture for our flyer for our industry lecture. That should be very exciting. It's going to be the Costa Concordia, and we'll have Titan Salvage. Somebody will be coming to speak about the salvaging of the Costa Concordia. So please mark your calendars. It'll be on April 28th. And for those of you that don't know, we will be building, hopefully in the next few years, a new museum. And if you go to the front, we do have a rendering of the new museum, so please stop by. And if you're at the front, you should pick up one of these pamphlets. It tells you all about our museum, some of the history, and it also has a membership form, and that's how we run. So please consider a membership with the museum. We will pass around a sign-in sheet, and this is just standard protocol. Leslie likes to tell everyone that it's for accreditation, so please sign this. And it'll just go around the room. If you add your email and you're not on our mailing list already, we can go ahead and get you all of our newsletters or e-blasts sent to you. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Mark Hinton here tonight, who is actually the author of Historic Houston Streets, The Stories Behind the Names. And we have someone here in the back from River Oaks Bookstore selling the book. So if you're interested in buying it, please feel free to step in the back, and I'm sure if we're nice, we can have Mark sign them for us. So Mark Hinton is the author of the book, and it's the only book ever published on the history of local streets. He is a retired investment banker and a founding member of the Friends of the Texas Room. He is a lifetime member of the Harris County Historical Society, and he also served on the Orange Show Center Visionary Art Eye-Opener Tour Committee for more than 25 years. So he is very well versed in Houston history, and we're looking forward to his lecture tonight on Houston's port and ship channel history as told by street names. So I'll let him take over.
Thank you very much. Is it working again or not? No. You can hear it okay? Yeah. Okay, good. Before we get started ready to talk, I have to tell you a funny story right quick. This book wouldn't have been written if it hadn't been for a man who's sitting back there in the back. Will Howard, put your hand up, Will. He used to run the Texas Room for about 10 years. I spent 10 years down there bugging him, and he let me go in all the secret cubby holes and everything else to find it. Otherwise, this book wouldn't get done. So thank you, Will. I appreciate your help. Okay, let's get started. The area around the Houston Ship Channel and the port are historically really different from any place else in the city. Unlike residential areas where streets are named for famous people, Michael Westheimer, Oscar Holcomb right out here, or they could be named for relatives of the developer. He can name streets for his kids, or the majority of them are just pretty sounding names like Babbling Brook or Whispering Pines or something like that. But in this area, the streets are more likely to be named for businesses or small communities because there were not a lot of really famous, well-known people down there that the streets are named for. But anyway, this is not usually a lecture I do. I've never done it before, so bear with me. So I'm looking forward to it. I've been talking on the streets for 10 years saying the same thing, so this will give me a chance to do something else. All right, let's get started. Armour Street. This was one of the earliest industrial ventures on the ship channel. It opened in 1914, and it was the Armour Fertilizer Works. Due to the confluence of railroads and shipping lines and chemical plants, phosphate was readily available down at the port, and as a result, it could be used for the production of fertilizer. So this company came in and opened up its business, And they also are remembered by the old timers for publishing the Farmer's Almanac. It was published in the 1920s, similar to the Farmer's Almanac we have today. Okay? BP Amoco Street. This company can trace its roots back to 1866, when Charles Lockhart began shipping and storing crude and refined oil products. Today, it is one of the world's largest energy companies. It consists of Amoco, Arco, British Petroleum, Burmer Castrol. The company explores for oil and gas, operates refineries, and also produces petrochemicals at plants throughout the world, and also produces solar power. Next, this is Barber's Cut. We're going to hear more about it in a minute, but in 1928, Captain Clyde A. Barber purchased 1,435 acres of land at Morgan's Point down on the bay with hopes of building a marine terminal to compete with the Port of Houston. He succeeded in dredging the canal you see right here. It's not that big, but it was smaller than that. And he called it Barber's Cut. Unfortunately, his timing was terribly poor. The Great Depression came and hit him, and that ended Captain's dream of competing with Houston. But beginning in 1985, a terminal was built here, and it is one of the largest and most modern container shipping facilities along the Gulf Coast. Its official name is Fentress Bracewell Barber's Cut Container Terminal, which is a mouthful. Bracewell served as chairman of the board of the Port Commission for 15 years. Next. This is quite a difference. Well, let me start with this here. Today the road leads to San Jacinto State Park, and that's the home, of course, of the San Jacinto Monument and the berth of the battleship Texas. However, it was quite different on 3:30 p.m. on the afternoon of April 21st, a Tuesday in 1836, because here was the scene of the battle that was going to occur for 18 minutes between General Sam Houston's army and Santa Anna, which of course we all know the outcome of that. And this photo here will help me find this photo actually. This came from this is the old Battleground Oak, which was where Santa Anna signed the independence right there and surrendered. Bayport. This boulevard leads to one of the largest petrochemical complexes in the United States. It's the Bayport Industrial Complex. It's the site of the world's largest styrene plant. Styrene is produced from a combination of benzene and ethylene and is used to make a wide variety of polystyrene products. It's also the home to our new cruise terminal, which currently Carnival and Princess come into. Next, Baytown. Baytown is named for its location on fronts on Burnett, Scott, Mitchell, Black Duck, Tabbs, and Galveston Bay, so it comes to its name legitimately. It's principally an industrial town, and it was and still is the home of numerous refineries and chemical plants. The area was first settled in 1822 by a man named Nathaniel Lynch, who we'll talk about in a little bit. John Thomas Brady, for whom Brady Street is named, was a Houston pioneer. He owned substantial land holdings between Houston and Harrisburg. In addition, he was an attorney, he owned a brick manufacturing kiln, and was a founder of Balin's Orphans Home down on the bay down there. He was an early advocate of making the Port of Houston accessible to ocean-going shipping, and he attended a well-known meeting called the Deep Water Meeting on the 6th of January of 1890. Following the meeting, he gathered up as many people as he could, put them on a boat, and brought them up to Magnolia Park, which is on the east side of town, and he walked them through his park there, proudly displaying the 3,750 blooming magnolia trees that he'd planted. Apparently his colleagues were impressed because shortly thereafter the Houston Belt and Magnolia Park Railway was incorporated. It ran from Brady's Landing to the Constitution Bend on the channel. It was partly through his efforts that President Benjamin Harrison signed the Rivers and Harbors Bill that led to substantial port improvements all over the United States. Brady Island, which is right here, is named for him. Here's the ship channel here, and there's Brady Island. It is named in his honor. Canal Street. Canal Street prior to 1918 was called German Street. So the large German population that lived in that part of town. But the name was changed because of the anti-German sentiment during World War I. And although none of the maps I studied, and Will's got a lot of maps down there at the library, believe me, showed any canals anywhere near the ship channel area. So my guess is that probably the maritime nature, the location near the port, and the street called Navigation being down there, it was probably picked just because it had a quasi-maritime name. This is Washington Cemetery, which is off of Washington Avenue. And it also was called German Cemetery. It started by the German association here back turn of the last century. And that's just sort of what it looks like. There's a lot of German people buried in there. But that name got changed too in 1914. Channelview. Both the street and the refinery suburb are named because of its location on the north bank of the ship channel. It was founded at the turn of the 20th century and perched on the banks. And the port at that time was a pretty nascent spot, you can imagine. What the town is most famous for is this lady here. This is Wanda Holloway, who hired the hitman to kill her cheerleader daughter's rival in 1991. Fortunately, he went to the police and ratted her out, and that was sort of the end of it. So all was well ended well. Next, Clinton. Now, it's not named for William Jefferson Clinton, the 42nd President of the United States. In 1874, the Morgan Steamship Line and the Port of Galveston had a falling out over wharf fees. Ship owner Charles Morgan, who founded Morgan City, Louisiana, the port there, dredged the channel at Buffalo Bayou to Morgan's Point and at Sims Bayou. There he constructed, in 1876, he brought in rail lines, major railroads came in the area. So the result of that was not only did he not have to pay a red cent to Galveston, but he could also charge hefty fees to other sailors and whatnot that were coming, ship owners that were coming up the channel to use his docks. Crown Street in 1917, the Crown Oil and Refining Company, which still exists today, it's known as Crown Central Petroleum today, was almost bankrupt when they got very lucky. They hit black gold with well number 3 right outside the Pasadena city limits, and the oil strike saved the company. In 1920, they constructed a refinery on that location just east of the entrance to the Washburn Tunnel. And today this Pasadena Street leads to the facilities on that site that refine approximately 100,000 barrels of crude oil every day. This was their logo. Okay, Deepwater. This is a little town that no longer exists, but it was once located between Deer Park and Pasadena, and it was named that because of its location on the channel. In the late 1890s, the town was a stop on the Galveston, Houston, and Northern Railroad. And the town was actually platted by a gentleman named Colonel J.H. Burnett, who also founded Genoa, Texas, and platted Pasadena. This is where Deepwater was, right there. It's just off the 223 expressway. It's not there anymore, as I said. This street is called Elevator Street, and it leads to, as you can see, a large complex of grain storage elevators, and also what's called the Elevator Storage Railroad Yard. And that's still down there, some of that is. Okay, next we have Ethel Street. This industrial thoroughfare leads to the Ethel Corporation Industrial District docks. In 1921, Ethel discovered that a combination of chemicals, when added to their gasoline, reduced NOx in engines. So after that, motorists could buy regular, or they could buy high-test Ethel gasoline. Some of y'all may be old enough to remember that you used to pull into every filling station was full service, and you pulled in the filling station, the guy walked up and said, "You want regular or Ethel?" And today, Ethel Corporation develops and produces additives for fuels as well as lubricants on a worldwide basis. So that was a picture of the pumps. Galena. The city of Galena Park was originally named Clinton, Texas, by an early pioneer named Isaac Batterson. The Galena Signal Oil Company of Texas was the first refinery located in Clinton. The city's name was changed to Galena Park in 1935 because the citizens applied for a post office, and there's a rule of Texas that says there can be no 2 towns with the same name because they can deliver the mail. So Clinton was already taken, and somebody else just came up with the Galena Park. Okay, this street is called George Altvater. He is credited with establishing the hugely successful barber cut terminal that exists today. He arrived in Houston in 1959, and he was named Director of Trade and Development for the Houston Port. He retired in 1979, having served as the port's executive director for the previous 8 years. The street was opened in 1980, and George Altabar Drive allows travel between the east and west terminals without using public roads, which dramatically reduces the congestion down there. This is him right here at a meeting when they were forming the plan to build the terminal. This street is called Goose Creek. It's a Baytown street, and it's named for a creek that runs through that town the same name. It empties into Galveston Bay near a place called Hog Island. Oil was discovered in Goose Creek in 1915, created a boom, as you can imagine. And so the people that came down started the new town down there, and they called it Old Town. Well, Old Town was wiped out in the oil well explosion a year or so later. So the survivors immediately started New Town nearby, and then the name was later changed to Goose Creek in 1916. This is a picture of the wells out in the bay. Harrisburg. John Richardson Harris established the town of Harrisburg, Texas in 1825. He named it after himself as well as after Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a city that was founded by his great-grandfather. General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna burned the town on April 16th of 1863, 5 days before he met his fate at San Jacinto. Harrisburg, in 1847, Harrisburg became the first railroad terminal in Texas, with the creation of the Buffalo, Bayou, Brazos, and Colorado Railroad Company. Houston annexed the town in December of 1926. The oldest cemetery in Houston, Glendale, is perched on a bluff overlooking the channel. And in this drawing here, if you look up here, you'll see the artist here sketched Glendale Cemetery. It's a beautiful cemetery if you have a chance to go. The only problem is there's only 4 people in the city that have a key to it. I'm one of them, so you'd have to call me. Or one of the other 3. But it's a beautiful place to see nonetheless. Hartman. Despite the fact that this bridge took 3 years longer to build and was over budget by $27, does not detract from it. $27 million. I say $27? That's pretty close. It's a beautiful bridge, as you can see, so it wasn't really affected by that. It's 1,250 feet long, which is the longest span in the state. It's 436 feet above the ship channel. And is supported by these 2 440-foot diamond towers that hold up these steel cables. You can see the cables coming down. It has 8 lanes of traffic, wide shoulders, and is the widest cable-stayed bridge in the world. And it was named for Fred Hartman, who was, for many years, from 1950 until 1974, the editor of the Baytown Sun newspaper. On December the 5th of 1911, the Galveston-Houston Electric Railway Company commenced operations. The electric train offered commuter services between Houston and Galveston. The passengers called it the Interurban, and they paid $1.25 for the ride, which took about an hour and 45 minutes. It was very, very popular because it was faster getting down there on the Interurban than it was any other mode of transportation. Unfortunately, the corporation fell on hard times during the Great Depression and filed for bankruptcy. So the last run for this train here was in 1936. Now, Will, is this the plant we're talking about, right?
Right.
Okay. I didn't know this till Will told me a minute ago. This street that goes in here is called Light Company. And it's the end of this street, which is at the confluence of Buffalo and Vince Bayous, is the Deepwater Power Station. It opened in 1924, so it was the oldest in the city. I would have here that it's been mothballed for years. Well, not only has it been mothballed, Will told me a few minutes ago that they blew it up last week, so it's not there anymore. It was built by Houston Lighting and Power, now Reliant Energy, and they're the people who named the street. This gentleman is the founder of Deer Park. His name is S.H. West, and he named almost all the early streets in this channel town. In this case, the street recalls his youngest daughter, named Luella. is only one of 3 streets that still remains in the key map that he named. The other 2 are P Street and X Street, not too original. He also named Center Street, and the street's still there, but the name was changed to West. The Shell Oil Complex came in and basically just paved over the whole thing, so that's why there's those very few streets there that still remain from the town. Lynchburg. Nathaniel Lynch, as I told you a minute ago, was the first white settler to come to this area of Texas, and it was in 1822. He acquired some land at the confluence of Buffalo Bayou and the San Jacinto River. And a town sprang up there. The people called it Lynchburg. And he had a ferry service that plowed the waters of the bays and bayous and rivers. It was originally called Lynch's Ferry, but today we know it as the Lynchburg Ferry. And those of you who used to listen to driving reports on your car on the way to work probably might remember the guy saying, there's always a 2-car wait at the Lynchburg Ferry. And that's where it was. This is Manchester. It was a little town where it was a stop on the Texas and New Orleans Railroad in the 1860s. In the 1820s, the Manchester Corporation operated a large freight terminal there on the south bank near Brady Island. And while the town no longer exists, the docks and whatnot still do. The Manchester Corporation owns. Pasadena, as the slide said, this is an excellent book, by the way, if you're interested in the history of Pasadena. It was written by a long-time native. Pasadena is the Chippewa word for crown of the valley. A detailed study that I performed myself of this city, I failed to find any noticeably beautiful valleys, but nonetheless, maybe I missed it. But it was named by Charles Munger, who named it after the city in California. This little spot, about 50 years ago, there was a town here on the banks of the bayou called Penn City. The town was eventually taken over by a town called Cloverleaf, but it was a station on the Beaumont, Sour Lake, and Western Railway. It gives me back on. Okay, does that work? Yeah, okay. Okay. Next one, please, Barbara. This is my wife, Barbara, by the way. This thing wouldn't be. Between her and Will, it's all working. Okay. This street is called Phillips Street, and it's named for Phillips Petroleum Company. And Phillips Petroleum and Phillips Chemical both have industrial districts here. The company was founded in 1917. And in 1921, they branded their famous Phillips 66 gasoline. And it's got its name for 2 reasons. One, an executive was riding back to Bartlesville, Oklahoma, which is the headquarters of Phillips. And he commented to the driver, he said, golly, this car goes like 60 on our new gas. And the driver looked down at the speedometer and said, 60 nothing, we're going 66. So that's one reason. And secondly, that event took place on the Mother Road, or US Highway 66, often remembered as Route 66. So the decision was made to call it Phillips 66, and the rest of it's history. In 1951, the chemists at the company invented polyethylene plastic. And one of the first things that they started using the product for in the 1950s were hula hoops. So there's a pump. This street is called Roman Haas. It's named for one of the world's leading producers of specialty chemicals, such as adhesives, sealants, coatings, and additives. They also own the largest salt company in the world, Morton's. Morton's was originally called Onondaga Salt Company. But this gentleman here, Joy Morton, bought the firm in 1886 and changed the name to Morton Salt Company. That division traces its roots back to 1848 and is famous for the slogan y'all remember, when it rains it pours. We were talking about, why would you name a street for this? The Runaway Scrape is probably one of the most ignominious events in the history of Texas, and why a developer would name a street for it, I don't know. But in April 1836, Santa Anna was just moving across Texas unchecked, heading toward Harrisburg, and he just won his victory at the Alamo. So those brave souls that were running the government, most of them took flight. The Secretary of State went to the United States. The Navy Secretary went to Galveston. citizens began to notice these rats running out of town, and they decided they better get out of there too. So this mass exodus, continued until Santa Anna's defeat at San Jacinto, and the word reached the civilians who'd gone to Louisiana. At that point, they began to trek back to their home, and the route they took both ways was Buffalo Bayou down to Lynch's Ferry to the San Jacinto River, northeast up to Liberty, and they finally holed up in Opelousas, Louisiana. That's a painting of it. Shell Street. Shell Oil Company is Houston's operations down the docks are located in Deer Park, as I said earlier. It's a huge corporation, but it began as an antique curio shell shop in London. And this was the owner of that. His name was Marcus Samuel. And he began to export oil for lamps and cooking oil. And he chose the name Shell Transport and Trading Company in 1897. And in 1894, because of his love of shells, he chose a pectin shell as the firm's logo, and that's the one we still see today. The company's expanded into oil and gas production and chemicals as the years went by, and today, of course, it's one of the world's biggest energy companies. This is a classic. Found this down at the library. R.H. Spencer was a county judge in the 1930s. He's most famous for creating Sylvan Beach Park. Spencer Highway is named for him. An old lady of Pasadena that I knew told me that one of the eccentric characters that lived in Pasadena at that time was a fellow named George W. Little Barnum Christie, who owned 2 circuses and was also served as a 2-term mayor of the city. And so that winter was probably one of the wettest winters in Houston's history. And although you can see here the rail cars were able to get in because they didn't have any problem, the trucks found the roads impassable. So construction people went to Little Barnum and said, "Can we borrow your elephants?" And they said, "Sure." So he brought the elephants because he used to winter them down here. And here's an elephant right here. And he's being loaded up, and off he's going to go. So it might have stopped the trucks, but it didn't stop the elephants. Okay. We mentioned Sylvan a minute ago. Sylvan leads to the Sylvan Beach Amusement Park on Galveston Bay, which is at LaPorte. And it was one of the hottest areas in the state during the 1920s and 1930s. And don't mean hot like weather-wise. I mean, it was the place to go. And as it gained national attention, all the big stars in Hollywood and whatnot, New York, wanted to come down and play. Records show that Rudy Valet was among them, as was Phil Harris and Benny Goodman. They were regulars there. In addition, it was a very popular place for bathing beauty contests, and they used to have a very famous bathing beauty contest every year. And the Houston Launch Club held its annual regatta day down there in the bay waters off of it. And of course, you can see a lot of beautiful sailboats. Old timers used to say that it was one of the grandest events anywhere along the Gulf Coast. Tenneco Street. It leads into the Tenneco Industrial District and Dock. That company was founded in 1943 as Tennessee Gas Transmission Company, and it was renamed Tenneco in 1963. And it was created to deliver natural gas by pipeline to defense plants in the Appalachian area during World War II. Later years, Tenneco expanded into oil and gas, chemical production, insurance, foodstuffs, and shock absorbers. And Romatic was one of their shock absorbers. And there's their sign. Okay, this is the Texas City Dike. It's a levee that extends 5 miles out into Galveston Bay from its start at Texas City. Construction was approved by the Texas legislature in 1935. It was designed to reduce the impact of sediment accumulating in the lower bay. But since then, its purpose has changed, and today it protects Texas City from the hurricane storm surge. And it was worth its weight in gold when Ike came through in 2008, because there was very, very little structural damage in Texas City. And yet, you remember the catastrophic destruction that hit almost every other town along the coast where the hurricane came in. It did get torn up, but it's repaired now, it's back in shape, and once again the locals say, "Come visit the world's longest man-made pier, we're back in business." The street's called Turning Basin. In order for Houston to build a port on Buffalo Bayou, it had to have somewhere where the ships could turn around naturally and head back out to sea. So in 1906, the Atlantic, Gulf, and Pacific Company of New York began dredging the basin, and it took 2 years to complete. This was an early picture of the turning basin. It's changed a little bit. Okay, this gentleman was a black rice grower, famous for his yield. The street's called Uncle Ben's, and the yield and quality of his crops was unmatched. His product was so good that many of the other people would say, well, my rice is as good as Uncle Ben's. Many years later, the Houston Converted Rice Company chose Uncle Ben to symbolize the high quality of their product, and many of you probably bought a lot of boxes of this stuff. Vince's Bridge. Alan Vince built a bridge today near the battleground at San Jacinto. This gentleman is Erastus F. Smith. Before the battle, Smith went down and burned that bridge to slow down Santa Ana. It slowed him down a little bit, not much, but anyway, but Vince eventually survived the war and became a farmer and rancher in that area down there. This is an early picture of the opening of the Washburn Tunnel. It is named for longtime Harris County Auditor Harry Washburn. He ran for auditor in 1905, but did not receive one single vote. He must have not even voted for himself. But 8 years later, he won the job and served the county for the next 41 years. County Commissioner E.A. Squatty Wyans called him, quote, an almost irreplaceable official. This tunnel connects Pasadena with the north side of the ship channel. It was opened in 1950, cost $9 million, and it was built with a prefabricated tunnel that was placed in a trench and then covered over. So that's what I was able to find out about the streets in the area of the port. This is Barbara and my new project, Exploration Houston Streets and Cemeteries. We are doing studies of, first we started with Houston cemeteries, then we went to Texas cemeteries, now we're doing world cemeteries, and we're trying to identify interesting people who live. We're not just trying to get famous people like John Kirby or Oscar Holcomb. The man that invented the ice cream cone is buried here. He didn't invent ice cream, but he invented the cone. That's a pretty interesting thing. So anyway, we're working on that, and we'd love for you to visit our site and take a look at it. So I'm sort of finished with the formal part, except I'll leave you one valuable piece of advice that I want you to pass on to your granddaughters. Tell them, always marry a historian, because the older they get, the more you'll love them. Thank you very much.
And does anybody have any questions for Mark?
Yes, sir.
Dowling Street.
Which one?
Dowling.
Dowling?
Dowling, yes.
Oh, yes, okay. Dowling was named for Richard W. Dick Dowling. He was born in Galway, Ireland, and he immigrated over here. He arrived in the 1830s, late 1830s. Because he was an Irishman, what business was he going to go in? Naturally, he owned a bar. It was downtown, very successful. It was called the Bar of Bacchus, and he served a famous drink there that he called Kiss Me Quick and Go. And he became quite a war hero during the Civil War at the Battle of Sabine Pass. He went over to Sabine Pass to defend the port there. He had 22 cannons, and there was an armada of hundreds and hundreds of ships carrying about 4,000 Union troops that was getting ready to try to capture the Sabine Pass. And he repelled them, and never in naval history before or since has a gun emplacement that small repelled an armada. And the admiral goes back to New Orleans, disgraced, and he was court-martialed because he was such an idiot that he lost the battle. So that's the story of Dick Dowling. He's buried in, you know where Nephi's on Navigation is? There's Our Lady of Guadalupe Church at the west end of the street there. There's a little cemetery there called, no, it's called, I forget the name of it now, I should have been there. Anyway, he's buried in that cemetery. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Offutt's Bayou or Offutt Street and Demetrieville.
Offutt's Bayou, that's a Galveston Street, and Offutt's Bayou, I don't know if it's in here or not. It was named for a Galvestonian, but I'm pretty sure I don't know who that is.
I can tell you what I
Oh,
know
okay.
the story. A sailor told me the story was the train that you talked about that took people from Houston to Galveston was segregated. And so at the point where it was no longer allowed to be white versus black, the conductor would yell, "All offits, all offits here," and that was the street where the people that weren't allowed to be on the train got off. That was the one. And then Demetrieville, you know about the story of Demetrieville? It was the little section of land between Galveston and Houston, and the gentleman there started his own little city in between Houston and Galveston to avoid taxes. And it's still there, and I think it has a somewhat of a nightclub establishment to it right now, but
Really?
it was the town of Demetrieville, and it was in between Houston and Galveston on the way when you cross over into Galveston.
Well, thank you. That's interesting. I did not know that. Talking about street being pronounced strangely, in River Oaks, there's a street called Shatter Way, S-H-A-D-D-E-R. It's just right off Kirby. And my mother swears this is true. She said that River Oaks Corporation had a rule you could not have more than one lot because they didn't want the houses to be too big. But this lady insisted, and she ended up finally buying 2 lots right next to each other. And myth story is that she named it Shatter Way because she had her way. More than likely, the truth is it's named for Shatter Way. It's a famous street in London. But anyway, it doesn't make as good a story. Any other questions? Yes, sir, back in the back. Chimney Rock? William Farrington, who developed Tanglewood, was sitting around the table with his wife and children, and he said, I want to name the streets in Tanglewood. I want them to be easy to understand for a telephone operator. So if you say, I need to speak to Mr. Jones on such and such a street, she can get that. And so the family would just sit out in the evening at dinner and write down names that were easy to pronounce. And it just happened to be that Chimney Rock is the name of a small town in northern New York. And Mary Farrington Miller attended school, and a girl from that school from Chimney Rock was her roommate. So that's where Chimney Rock came from. Yes, sir.
You know the background of Jotaro Boulevard?
Yes, that's a really odd deal. When it was being built, it was supposed to be Jet Era, J-E-T-E-R-A, because it was sort of the start of the jet. 2 words, Jet Era. And somehow when they wrote the contract, they put J-E-T-E-R-O as one word. Everybody signed off on it, and they weren't able to change it because it had taken so much legal mumbo jumbo, so it stayed there. Yes, sir.
Will Clayton.
Excuse me?
Will Clayton.
Oh, Will Clayton. Will Clayton was probably one of the most famous Houstonians that there was back in the World War I and the Depression. And he started a cotton trading company called Anderson Clayton with Anderson and Anderson Hospital, M.D. Anderson, Monroe D. Anderson. And his home today is not far from here. It's down on Caroline Street, right next to where the Clayton Genealogical Library is, except it's the house just to the north of that. And I think it's the stacks there now. But anyway, Clayton was amongst other things. He ran the Reconstruction program. He used to do all kinds of things. He used to walk, his office was down in the old Gulf building down on 700 block of Main Street. And on nice days, he would walk to work, and it was 2.5 miles each way, so he got a 5-mile hike if the weather was nice every day. So that's pretty. There's books on him. You can just read volumes on him. Yes, sir.
How about Buffalo Speedway?
That's a great one. There's 2 streets I get asked about the most: Buffalo Speedway and Stella Link. So I'll tell you about both of them. Buffalo Speedway, which starts there at where St. John's and School is, and run. When they laid it out, there used to be the railroad tracks down on West Park. Y'all remember those? And that's where the street stopped. Well, it was approximately a mile from St. John's down to the railroad tracks. And the street didn't have a name, they just put it there. And every kid with a hot rod, every boy with a hot rod wanted to run his car on it because it would be the fastest he'd get to go anywhere in town. And so it ended up being called Buffalo Speedway. Stella Link, people say, okay, who was Stella? You know, Stella Dallas, the movie, you know, or whatever. And actually, it's not named for Mr. and Mrs. Link's daughter, Stella. When William Westmoreland developed Bel Air, it was a farming community basically, and they needed somebody to get their produce from Bel Air to the market. Well, the Great International Northern Railway ran 10 miles south of Bel Air, so they went to the people. There's a little town down there called Stella, and they asked the railroad if they would put a link between Stella and Bel Air, and they did. So it was the link to Stella, and when the street was paved, it was called Stella Link. Well, thank you all very much. You've been a great audience. Oh, one more.
Have you climbed Mount Houston yet?
Mount Houston?
Yeah, have you climbed it yet?
It's out there near that valley in Pasadena somewhere. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you.
And please make sure you stop by in the back. We do have somebody selling the historic Houston Streets books. So please make sure you pick up a copy. And Mark, before you go, we wanted to give you this plaque in recognition of coming and speaking for our public. So thank you guys.